You had the Laurel Canyon scene that was starting to emerge. Manson, Charles Manson was a part of that. All these other things were happening. Martin Luther King was assassinated. Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. All these phenomenal social changes. The Beatles' music changed in tandem with everything else that was going on, and it started to become very psychedelic and very far out, very tripped out. You started to have songs like I Am the Walrus and Revolution Number 9 and Helter Skelter, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Within You, Without You, all these crazy tripped out songs. What had happened there is the Beatles had gained a worldwide fan base by way of all these nice pleasant pop songs. Suddenly the music switches, and they tend to sweep along with them that fan base that they've had for the past 3 or 4 years. And most of those fans would observe that the music's a bit different, but they'd think, well, it's the Beatles, we'll go with it. We love the Beatles, and we'll go whatever direction they take us in. And so they get led off down a different path purely by way of the familiarity that the Beatles have built up, because people trust them, they like them. Then in recent years, we've seen the same thing happen with Beyonce. Beyonce first came out with Destiny's Child, which was this, very commercial, pop market friendly R&B group with all these nice songs, these 4 girls singing these nice R&B songs. And then Destiny's Child split up. Beyonce came out as a solo artist. She got put together with Jay-Z, and then gradually, year by year by year, a lot of the aspects of her music and her public persona started to get very dark. And so in a lot of her live shows, you started to get all this occultic, Masonic, Kabbalistic imagery coming in. You started to get all the dark stuff going into her videos. You started to get the normalization of the police state with her videos being full of, cyborg imagery and cyborg cops, Terminator type cops. You had transhumanism starting to creep into her videos, elements of mind control. And it all started to get very, very dark. They did the same thing with Miley Cyrus. Look at the number they played on Young Girls with her. She emerged as Hannah Montana. Squeaky clean, all-American girl next door. Parents didn't mind their young daughters being into Miley Cyrus because she was, squeaky clean like that. But then she did this major switch, and pretty much overnight she became this porn star slut, a very far cry from the previous image. But by then, they'd already got the fan base in place. All these young girls loved Miley Cyrus through Hannah Montana, so they see her doing this different kind of stage show, and they think, oh, well, it's Miley Cyrus, we love her. So they go with it, and they get led off down that path, and they start to get mind-controlled, and, their perceptions get corrupted by all the stuff that's going into Miley Cyrus videos and stage shows. They've got you. So this is how they prepare the public for these artists. And so obviously the plan is in place from day one as to what they're going to use these artists for. So when the Beatles first emerged, this is a controversial one. A lot of Beatles fans won't be having this. A lot of people that remember the 1960s consider it sacrilege that you could suggest that the Beatles were anything other than this group of 4 lads with some great talent that worked really hard and became successful, and these 4 lovable lads from Liverpool. But there is a lot of evidence to suggest, and there is a lot of researchers that have put this stuff out, that the Beatles were a product of the Tavistock Institute and other aspects of military intelligence, and that it was always the plan that they would become the number 1 pop group of the 1960s. Does anyone really believe that this cabal that we've got running the world, running the political system, running the banking system, running every other aspect of daily human life, is going to leave it to chance as to which pop group is going to become a cultural phenomenon and be the voice of an entire decade? Are they just going to allow that to happen organically? Or are they going to want to be in control of who it is that takes that position? For me, it's pretty obvious that they would want to control that dynamic from day one. So that, to me, tells me that the Beatles had been selected as the group that would be this cultural phenomenon in the 1960s, and the switch in their music that took place when it was in tandem with the psychedelic era and LSD and everything else that was going on in the latter part of the 1960s was planned from the outset. And part of the plan was getting them familiar to the public with all these nice pop songs so that when they did the switch, they've got the fan base in place. It's a template and a blueprint that they've been rolling out forever. They tend to have these templates. When a plan works really well for them, they just roll it out again and again and again and again, decade after decade after decade. And so that's what they've done with Miley Cyrus. That's what they did with Britney Spears. That's what they did with Rihanna, with Beyonce. That's what they do with all these artists. That's what I feel is going on.
Yeah, I totally. Yeah, the bait and switch. Yeah, that's. I think that's a great answer for that. Okay, so is it Karen? So Karen,
okay, so,
have you ever been contacted by any music artist who's read your material, or tried to contact any artist whom you felt would be willing to join forces to get the message out in public?
Right. Well, I've been contacted by a whole load of artists who have not tasted major commercial success. So they're not celebrity household name A-list artists. You know, I've not had Rod Stewart or Elton John come to me and say, Mark, I need to work with you in exposing the evils of the industry. So, you know, nobody like that. But I've had a lot of musicians and band members and producers and rappers that have said to me, you're bang on the money with this. You're spot on. Because, you know, I've got to admit, when I first started putting this information out, of course I had some doubts in my mind. And I was thinking, have I got it right? Am I making a fool of myself or creating a whole world of problems for myself in putting this information out if it's not correct? I believed it to be correct, but you always appreciate validation. And I've got to tell you, I've had so much validation of the information that I've put out in the past 5 years that it absolutely convinces me that all of this is true and correct. So I've had a bunch of musicians and producers come to me and say, yes, we've experienced the very stuff that you're talking about in the book. We went for meetings with various record companies that wanted to sign us. They offered us a contract. We looked at what it involved, and something about it didn't feel right. And so we politely rejected. And many people at the time thought we were crazy. Our families told us we were crazy because we were turning our backs on fame and fortune and great financial reward. But something about it didn't feel right. And these people tell me that a couple of years down the line, they could see that another act that they'd signed in place of them was now being elevated to these upper levels of the industry. And they could see a lot of very disturbing, unsettling stuff starting to creep in. And they've thought to themselves, my God, that would have been us if we'd signed that contract. So I've had a lot of artists come to me with stories like that. I think it's pretty obvious why nobody of household name status has come forward and revealed all this stuff, because first of all, they would have signed some kind of contract and probably undertaken some kind of oath to never divulge the secrets of the industry. And secondly, for somebody of that ilk, of that prominence, to come forward and reveal great secrets would be extremely dangerous for them. You know, the risk involved would be very high, and it would take a very brave and courageous individual at that level to come forward and reveal all this stuff. So I don't think the fact that nobody of household name status has come forward exposing all this dark stuff that goes on in the industry can be taken as proof that it doesn't go on. I think there are very understandable reasons why we just wouldn't get people coming forward like that.
And, you know, I've talked about this before, but just like Elijah Wood, a couple, maybe 30 days ago, came out and started talking about, you know, from The Hobbit, he started, I don't know why, but all of a sudden he decided he needed to share, like so many of them have actually come forward about pedophilia in the industry, and how a lot of these big movie houses are just saturated with it in Hollywood. And 3 days later, he's recanting. Oh, I didn't mean that. I really didn't mean that. I mean, I really, please don't kill me. I really didn't mean that. You know, you can read the subtext. So I think when you make a lesson, you know, I think they make lessons of people who do, you know, and they make fools of them. And even people that do try, you know, I applaud Corey Feldman. I applaud Roseanne Barr, who's spoken. I applaud poor Dennis Quaid. What have they done to him? Everyone thinks he's a mad, raving, needs to be locked up, institutionalized lunatic for speaking the truth. Right? I
mean, Charlie Sheen came out with some comments about 9/11 being an inside job. Don't really see Charlie Sheen in too much these days, do you? And he was demonized
Yeah.
He was demonized very soon afterwards as being mentally unstable and a drug addict and all the rest of it. You don't see Dennis Quaid in too many movies now. I don't really see Roseanne Barr doing too much. So anyone that does speak out, their career seems to nosedive overnight. And then you have these celebrities who recant things that they've previously come out with. As you said, an example from the music industry would be Ralph Bellamy, who's the frontman of the group Muse.
Oh, yeah.
So Muse put out a handful of tracks that really seemed to be speaking to us truth seekers and those of us that figured out something was wrong in the world. So they put out this track called Uprising.
Yep.
And if you get the lyrics to that track, it's incredible. It's like a voice being given to us, our generation of critically minded, truth-seeking individuals. So Ralph Bellamy did some interviews a few years back where he was questioning 9/11, and he was saying that the official story didn't stack up. And Muse are putting out tracks like this, But what do we find a few years down the line? In an interview, he suddenly recants his previous comment about 9/11, and he says that now he believes the official narrative and he can understand how it did actually happen that way. So the two possibilities here are that he was always some kind of plant and that Muse were just playing mind games with the public and they're just messing with us, or that was a genuine, heartfelt comment from him, but he was taken aside and had a friendly word with shortly afterwards and ordered to go out there and take back this statement. So we see this kind of thing happening with other artists as well. Damon Albarn, who was in Blur and Gorillaz, he's been, or in previous years, he was seen as something of a political activist. He made a lot of public statements about homelessness, about government austerity programs, that sort of thing. What did we see at the start of the year? We see Damon Albarn taking an MBE from the Queen, a knighthood. To me, anyone who is genuine and is switched on and is conscious in terms of understanding what's going on in this world and wanting to communicate it to people and get truth out there would never take an MBE, a knighthood, from the Queen. The Queen, the royal family, are absolutely embroiled in institutionalized paedophilia. I mean, anyone that can't see that with all the evidence that's out there, I truly don't know what to tell you. But, the last thing you would want to do is be associated with this institution in any way. So you get artists who previously have been seen as outspoken and controversial suddenly taking knighthoods. What is that all about if it's not neutering them into obedience and just completely watering them down and disengaging them from any kind of activism? I mean, Goldie took an MBE, for God's sake. The drum and bass artist, the graffiti artist, Goldie, who was always seen as a sort of counterculture hero in the 90s. He was edgy, he was dangerous. He took a frigging knighthood from the Queen. What is going on? So where are all the heroes?
Oh my gosh.
Where are all the heroes? Who is genuine?
And
we really don't have any celebrities on our side because they're just not allowed to put themselves out there in that way.
Well, they're tools of 3D reality industry. They're just, it really requires to be able to, like we were talking about before we began recording, you have to be fully embodied, but be able to go outside and kind of look down, like the Matrix, like that kind of thing. You have to stand outside and be able to clearly, see what's going on and then step in and say, what am I here to do? How can my light, how can my frequency, how can my message like yours change? Even one person, can be huge. And I don't know, it'd be great to see some celebrity heroes. It would, and I will share, I do believe there have been celebrity heroes. The actor who was in Fast and Furious, I believe he stepped out.
Paul Walker, yeah.
He said he had a religious experience and he came to know God, and it appeared from his actions that he did. He started giving his money away. I've talked to people that I know that are in the industry that said he truly was trying to get out of the industry. And we always say, my kids and I say, we know there's no way to get out of the industry. The only way to get out of the industry is they'll kill you and they'll take you out of the industry. And that appears to be, with all the predictive programming, all the foreshadowing, for goodness sakes, he's in the movie Skull and Bones and crazy. He died exactly.
And he just happens to die in a car crash. Could have happened to anyone, but it just happened to be him.
He was standing by in a red Porsche, I think, I'm pretty sure, that he was standing by and that they gave him as a gift for coming into the industry, he died in going out of the industry. So you have to admire, you guys. Please understand where I'm coming from when I say this. The genius of it.
The audacity of it.
It's stunning. It's just, it's almost admirable. Why isn't our, if you want to say side, which I don't like to say side because of polarity, but where are the heroes? I love that you said that. I want you guys to ask yourself that, where can I be a hero? Whether it's really microcosm in your everyday life, or I feel I'm a hero as a mother. I'm training 4 awake, enlightened human beings that see through all this BS. And they can get on there and speak almost as eloquently as you. I think that's mind-blowing for a 14-year-old or an 18-year-old or a 23-year-old in this society. There's something heroic about that, not to toot my own horn. I know you guys are too in our audience. But whether it's that micro hero or whether it is becoming an author or doing a podcast or getting a message out as you become aware, as you become convicted, just kind of play with that, where can you be a hero? And I want to get Karen's question in too.
And if you look at the work of Jan Irvin at Gnostic Media, and I thoroughly recommend that people look at his work. I know that his style is not everyone's cup of tea. He could be quite abrasive, but the information he's got is absolutely astounding and very, very vital. And Jan Irvin is of the view that anyone that is in the public eye as any kind of cultural hero or any kind of celebrity is dirty and is, controlled and manipulated and not to be trusted. A lot of people say he takes it too far because he makes a blanket statement and says, anyone that is put out there in those kind of positions is not to be trusted in that way. And a lot of people think that you can cherry pick the odd name and say, oh, but what about them? What about them? But I think there could be something to what he says. And I think we've got to stop looking to celebrities and cultural icons as our heroes. And we've got to realize that we are our own heroes.
I like that. I love that.
We turn this situation around. Don't look to externalize your power to anyone else. Understand that we individually and collectively have so much more power than we think, because we've been programmed and conditioned to think that we don't, and to think that we're unimportant, and to think that there are greater forces at work than us. But we decide how this whole thing pans out. Us, any one of us, any one individual listening to this. You don't need letters after your name. You don't need to have gone to any university or institution. Any one individual with consciousness intact is an essential component in the process that needs to take place in this world. We need to be our own heroes and stop looking to, Kim Kardashian or Kanye West or whoever the hell it is, David Beckham. Stop putting these jokers on pedestals and realize that we can have any kind of situation we want. Going back to what I was talking about earlier, you manifest the physical situations that you experience with your own will and your own intent and your own consciousness. So imagine a world of like-minded people all pooling that consciousness, all wanting a better situation for humanity, a better situation for future generations to live in. The power of that number of people bringing that positive consciousness together is going to be like nothing else the world has ever seen. That process is waiting to happen anytime enough of us want it.
I love that. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And Sylvia, this is going to be available for a replay, and we're going to doctor it up and make it fancy. So you can I know Mark talks really fast. Remember what we just discussed? And I don't know if you're aware of this, Mark, you probably are. But I was talking about the higher the frequency a person runs at, literally, I said one way to identify high frequency people, they talk so darn fast. And you're what I could tell right away. I'm like, man.
I don't think I do. I listen to other interviews.
I know, but that's how you know. You don't think you do, but other people think you do. And that's one sign of a high frequency person. Right. There's a lot of signs. But
that's why we record this, right? So people can go back and listen to it again.
I always say, I'm like, you can even on your recording, you guys, I don't know, you can even, I know it kind of drags, but you can turn down the speed too. People always used to complain, I got to tell you, Mark, when I went on these radio shows and TV shows, people are like, will you tell her to stop talking so fast? And I'm like, hey, I'm sorry, this is me.
I think it's when you get passionate. When you get passionate, you have to get it out there.
Then you talk like super speed like I do, like 10 times your normal speed, which is fast. So someone else has Oprah. I don't know who Tyler Perry is. You guys are going to have to inform me. Maybe you do, Mark. I don't. But someone says, has Oprah and Tyler Perry been bought and paid for as well? All I'm going to say is, before Mark answers, from my research and my people I know, Oprah is 100% a Satanist. She goes to, for goodness gracious sakes, I believe she goes to, or has been to, some of the meetings. They just had one that they tried to cover up with a false flag in the U.S., the Rothschild meetings. I know she's been at least one, I believe many. She's bought, paid for many times over. Although, and the girls and I talk about this a lot, Oprah to me is a victim perpetrator. She's perpetrating the agenda and she's a victim of the agenda. A lot of the artists are. Even the artists like Beyonce, I believe she's a victim perpetrator. So these people are as much victims of this. They may have chosen and they may have not, as you referred to throughout this talk. But and when she talks about her abuse and all that, and then there's this big controversy, I believe that she may have been groomed along or been a victim. That's just my guess. An MK Ultra monarch programming, some kind of victim of that and groomed for that, I imagine, would be my guess. I don't know who Tyler Perry is. Who is Tyler Perry, you guys? I don't know who that is.
I don't really know who Tyler Perry is either. I've heard the name, but see, I just hate the world of celebrity. I look at it for research purposes, but I can't stand these bloody people. I
can't either.
They don't seduce me in the way that they seem to seduce the rest of the public. So it only ever is research when I look at these people. But Oprah Winfrey, yeah, dirty as hell, from what I've heard, from what I've come to discover. She quite simply would not be in that position if she wasn't. Again, they wouldn't leave it to chance. They wouldn't allow her to just naturally, organically evolve into the top chat show host seen by that many millions of people if she wasn't being controlled. So absolutely. And you make a good point about the fact that many celebrities will be victims of mind control themselves, and they're victims and perpetrators at the same time. And I think many of them are also handlers to other mind control subjects. And I think this is the nature of a lot of celebrity relationships that we see. Does anyone believe that Beyonce and Jay-Z fell in love, romantic love? They fell for each other, went out for a few dates, their hearts started to flutter, and they thought, yeah, this is the one for me. Kim Kardashian and Kanye, who believes that was a natural romantic relationship? These couples are put together. It's like arranged marriages. Brad and Angelina and any number of other industry relationships you might care to mention. These people are put together because it enables their handlers to kind of keep a close eye on them and keep them closely controlled. And also they're just, fulfilling their role in an ongoing agenda. So in many ways, you can pity these people. I certainly do. I look at the likes of Kanye and Jay-Z and Beyonce and Rihanna and Katy Perry and Kesha, who's a particularly tragic figure, and Britney Spears and Miley Cyrus and Nicki Minaj, another one. On the one hand, you can look at them and you can hate what they're doing because you can see how they're corrupting the values and degrading the spirituality of young people that are watching it, particularly young girls. Because that's the target market for Nicki Minaj, Rihanna, Miley Cyrus, young girls, 7, 8, 9, 10 years of age. And you can see the effect that their toxic garbage, this hateful, satanic, septic stuff that they put out there is having on these young kids. And it's very easy to then hate the artist. But you've got to remember that many of these artists have had no choice in the matter. They've been born into it. They were probably satanically ritually abused and mind controlled themselves from a young age, and they've just been pushed into the public spotlight whether they like it or not. This is the life that's been laid out for them. And really their life is hell. They might have the mansions and the fast cars and the yachts and the champagne parties, but if you don't have your spirituality intact, if you don't have your true humanity intact, and if you can't make free will decisions for yourself, if your mind is not your own, then what kind of existence is that really? No amount of champagne and Bentleys can make up for that kind of existence. So really, I try and spare a thought for what it is these artists go through themselves in their own lives when you leave aside the corruptive influence they're having on others. It's a pretty devastating existence for them.
And if you guys want to look up The Climb, I don't know if they've stripped it or it's all versions, but when that first came out, Miley Cyrus, The Climb, I heard I heard from many different people that if you play that backwards, that she's like, someone please help me. So sometimes they encode not just satanic messages, which so many of the songs do, which has been going on for years. I've got to tell you this. I remember I went to a Christian school, so we had limited entertainment options, but we were sitting around at lunch playing Hotel California backward. And I think it says, I don't remember what it says, but clear as day. The old tapes, were winding it backwards, and for being in radio, this is like a radio talk thing, but back in the day, did you learn on reel to reel? Like, are you old school? Did you learn old school?
Oh, totally. I relate an anecdote in the book of how when I worked in a radio studio, 1990 this was, and it was reel-to-reel tape, long before computers. Did you have carts? Did you use carts?
Oh my gosh, yes. Carts, boom, 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 all these piles,
This is radio talk, but carts were like cartridges with a little loop of quarter-inch tape in a plastic shell, and all the jingles and all the ads would be on carts. But anyway, this was the reel-to-reel tape era, and I relate a story in the book of how I reversed a Madonna record one time because I'd heard there was a subliminal satanic message encoded in a Madonna record, Justify My Love, and you can only hear it if you play the record in reverse. So being as I had access to reel-to-reel tape machines, which you could load and play backwards, I tried this one time in a radio studio at 3 o'clock in the morning, and absolutely chilled myself to the bone when I heard a message saying, hear us, love us, Satan. I love Satan, coming through in this Madonna record. And so for me, that was my first confirmation, long before I got on this path of research, that subliminal messages and backmasking is very, very real. And it goes on with the full intent of musicians and producers, so it can be deliberately encoded in, but also that stuff finds itself in there without the conscious knowledge of the music makers. So you sometimes get messages coming through that have been derived from the subconscious of the creators of that track.
Okay.
And they weren't aware when they recorded that track that it was going into it. This is getting into the realms of reverse speech therapy and how that works.
I love that. Oh my gosh.
It's a bit of a long one. I won't go fully into it now, but if people want to have a look at the work of a guy called David Oates, an Australian, David John Oates, and also the work of a guy called John Kelly, who's up there in Canada, and he has a website called yourinnervoice.com. These guys explain how the phenomenon of reverse messages finding their way into recorded speech and recorded music actually works, what that dynamic is, and what's really going on. It's absolutely fascinating.
I hadn't heard that. That opens up a whole nother train I don't even have time to get and ride on. That's
awesome. So sometimes it's there for a reason. The Beatles, for example, often John Lennon in a bunch of interviews said, yeah, sure, we use subliminal messages the whole time. We were always putting backward stuff into the Beatles records. So that's where it's known about.
Right.
But then there's other times where it's not done with the full will of the music maker. Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven is another famous one where you get the phrase, here's to my sweet Satan.
Yes.
And I think it's perfectly possible with those guys because they dabbled in the dark occult and they were very into the works of Aleister Crowley. I think it's possible that message found itself into that recording without them deliberately placing it there. It was a representation of their mindset, of where they were at in their vibrational frequencies at the time they recorded that music. That's how I feel about it.
Interesting. I have never heard that. I'm gonna have to look into that.
Did I just blow your mind?
Yeah, stop it. I'm still getting over the Billy Graham thing. One thing at a time. I can take it in. It just takes me a while to come back to center. Is there any classical music related to Satanism? Karen asked.
Well, to be honest, the classical music genre is one that I need to look into fully. I've not looked into it yet, so I couldn't say one way or the other. I'm sure there's stuff happening at a base frequency level in classical recordings. There will be music that makes you feel good, that puts you in a good space because of the frequency at which it was recorded, because of the energy that went into the production. And I think we all know there's music that kind of puts you on edge and makes you feel not too settled and not too good about things. We get into the realms of frequencies here with 440 hertz versus 432, That's a whole complicated subject area in itself. I go into that in the book as well. I would say there probably is classical music that is down with the program, but I've not studied it to enough of a degree to be able to pinpoint individual composers or individual tracks. I think everyone knows, though, how a certain piece of music makes them feel.
Good point. Really?
And if listening to a piece of music makes you feel like you want to drive at 100 miles an hour or you want to hit somebody, then there's probably something going on at an energetic level in the way that music was put together.
And even though we're a technologically advanced society, there's been other societies that are technologically advanced in the past too. And this is not a new agenda. This agenda has been going on, as far as I'm concerned, from the beginning of time. And we just see it expressed differently than other cultures. But so when you do say it can't be classical music because they didn't have this and they didn't have that. They have the same, I believe, this is my personal belief, they have the same spiritual entities and energies that are behind this group of people who are much wiser.
Well, a lot of classical musicians, composers, were Freemasons. You know, it's a matter of public record that they were. And then you can ask yourself why the likes of Beethoven or Mozart or Chopin or Strauss or any of these people were the superstars of their day. Why is it that people are talking about Beethoven's music and Mozart's music now, however many 100 years later it is, and not somebody else's, when there would have been other composers making music at that time? It's the same reason why the Beatles...
about that. Wow.
Yeah. It's the same reason why the Beatles and the Rolling Stones were the two biggest groups of the 60s and all the other groups weren't, because they were the chosen ones. So if you've heard of them and if you're talking about them 300 years later, they've got to be down with the program in some way. Why is Shakespeare taught in schools but other writers' works aren't? There's some debate over whether Shakespeare actually existed. I'm well aware of that. But there'll be a reason why kids study Shakespeare even now and don't study other writers. Again, it's all down to chosen ones, those that are placed there.
And all you guys have to do to get the proof of that is, we pay for programming. We all do TV programming, radio program. I pay for Sirius Radio. And the girls and I always joke, I'm like, oh, which 20 artists do we get to hear today? And you are well acquainted with this in the music industry, but it is the chosen ones. And it's clear when you take your mind out of all the distraction and all the programming and you become an observer, all of this can be known. You don't have to be Mark. You don't have to be me. You don't have to believe any of it. But if you begin to be a keen observer of feelings is one way of measuring energy, a keen observer of patterns, of symbols, of numbers. I believe most of this, a stranger, if they were awake, could become privy to, because one of the signs of being awake is to be what? Be in full creation, be in your full power, be a keen observer, have your intuition opened, all these things. So this is such a brilliant conversation. I want to wrap it up because I need to let all of us go.
Can I just jump in very quickly on that point? And yes, I need to get going as well. So we'll bring it to an end. But just to pick up on what you've said, there is always an opportunity to know. This is a very key point. We're always given the opportunity to know truth. And this is why they do things like predictive programming. This is one of the most crucial chapters in my book. And I say to people, if you only read one chapter in the book, make it the one on predictive programming and free will consciousness and consent and how that is hijacked. Because the reason they put things like they symbolically represent real world events which are yet to happen is because they're giving us the opportunity to know. As I've said, it's usually done in a cryptic encoded form that only a few are going to be able to understand, but the opportunity is always there. So if the will is there on your part to do the research, to become literate in symbols, to understand the methods by which these sick psychopaths work, you have the opportunity to see what they're up to, and you have the opportunity to disengage from it, play no part in it, withdraw your consent, and just don't engage with them in any way. And also to warn others and communicate this information to other people. The opportunity is always there. The onus is on us as to whether we choose to take that opportunity on or whether we choose to ignore it. Just wanted to make that point.
I absolutely agree. And someone asked the name of your book, which is Musical Truth. And Where can we purchase that? How can we get a copy of that?
Okay, so it's on Amazon. There's a paperback version, a hardback version, and a Kindle version. It's also on Barnes & Noble. But if anyone wants a signed copy from me direct, I'm posting out signed copies. And so if people can pay by PayPal and they want to email me direct, they can email me on mark@markdevlin.co.uk. And then we can just do a little private thing via PayPal, and I'm happy to post out a signed copy. So if people just want to get it on Amazon, that's the easiest way. It's certainly on there. But if anyone wants to reach out to me personally, then we can get it going in that way.
Yeah, I love that. And I don't want to ignore, Sylvia says, I hope you see, thanks for opening my eyes. Isn't that worth coming on? Just if one person says that, that's Absolutely. Brilliant. It's amazing.
That's why we do this.
I love that. Thank you, Sylvia. And I don't want to overlook this question just because it's a tricky one. And then I'll let you go, Mark, but I don't even know who this is. I'm not sure who this is. I don't know if it's Stacy or someone else, but it says, is it your understanding that Satan is simply a word and not an actual entity? And I'm going to take that, and then I'll let you take that, Mark.
Sure.
And this is I always say it's my belief. It's my experience. You have your belief and you have your experience, but you are asking the question. It is absolutely not my understanding that Satan is a word. And this is what I always say, and I'm going to give my standard David Icke answer, which is, come with me to an exorcism, and then we'll talk. And that's my standard answer. I think some things need to be experienced to be judged. Let's put it that way. So your answer, Mark, for that.
Well, my take on that is that a lot of people's perception of Satan has been programmed into them. So people think of this devil type figure with a pitchfork and horns and stuff. That's the Christian sort of view of Satan. It's interchangeable with Lucifer, with the devil, and that's missing the point. Satanism is a state of mind, a spiritual state, which is all about selfishness, basically. That's what it comes down to. Service to self, believing yourself to be a god. Yep. It ties into Aleister Crowley's phrase, do what thou wilt. It's implying that we are our own gods and we don't need the God of creation. We can just do whatever we want, and to hell with the consequences. That is the absolute antithesis and enemy of Christ consciousness. This is not the figure of Jesus Christ, but this is basically a spiritual state of truth, of being at one with the creative force behind the universe. Satanism is the exact opposite of that. Satanism is about me, me, me. What do I want? Bugger everyone else. Truth is all about natural law and doing no harm. Understanding that you must not undertake behaviors or actions which harm another. And as long as you live your life according to that principle, then you're in line with Christ consciousness as it's known, and truth, and the creative force behind the universe. So Satan is a much misunderstood and misaligned phrase, I would suggest. But I agree with you that demonic possession absolutely exists. Demonic entities are in this realm of creation, and that should not be underestimated. And the reason we have Satanists and Luciferians running the show is because they're in touch with that dark, demonic, negative energy. But again, that can change anytime we want it. And that energy can be overwritten with love frequencies anytime enough of us choose it. That's always the overriding message behind any of this information.
And I hope you guys, I'm going to copy this really quick so I have it before this ends. It's the easiest place for me to copy it. But we'll be posting this in the membership site too for you guys to see. And like I said, we're going to put this together and we'll put excerpts up on YouTube and we'll get you out there. Gosh, now I don't know if I should get you too out there. You'll be like, no, I don't want to be too out there. So you're going to have to make up your mind because I have a wide sphere of influence here. But thank you so much for being with us. It was such a brilliant conversation. I love that we ended on hope, which is like totally my thing. And we ended on love, and we ended on the power
Always of one. Need to.
The power of one is like awesome. So thank you for sharing that message with us. Thank you for sharing truth. I so resonate with you. I applaud what you can do. I'll help you however I can. I appreciate you. I love your book. I love your research. I'm looking forward to the next one. Please let us know if you come to the States and you're doing some kind of seminar. Maybe.
Well, actually, I was there this year for the Free Your Mind conference in Philadelphia. I was there last year as well. I'm coming out. I'm coming out to the States in April next year.
Okay.
I'm coming to the Free Your Mind conference again, which is near Philadelphia. I'm not going to be speaking this time. I'm going to be there selling books. And you know what? This time, I want to get my ass out to LA, and I want to get myself a tour of Laurel Canyon because I want to see the belly of the beast where so much of this stuff went on. So I will be in the States. So anyone that can get along to the Free Your Mind conference near Philadelphia, it's April 7th to 9th, 2017. Then they can meet me there and we can at least have a conversation.
That'd be awesome. We'll talk about that, you guys. I just have to tell you this really quick about, you said Laurel Canyon. I just happened, I don't believe in coincidence, but I just happened to look at that property and the actor that bought it. I don't even know where I saw it. And I looked at that property, and you talk about how you feel when you look at pictures. Like, there's a feeling there. I've never felt that feeling looking at property, and I didn't even know what it was. But I just looked at, they showed all the pictures and all his artwork, and I mean, he's done a great job, you know what I mean, remodeling it or whatever you want to call redeeming the property. But why does he even want that property? Like, I think there's so much more going on there than we probably might know, too, still. But very interesting. But we can talk forever. I want to let you go.
We could. Thanks for getting me on. I definitely appreciate this opportunity to get information out. Any opportunity of this nature is gratefully appreciated. I want to thank everyone that came on the chat and has listened and contributed questions. It's just good to be a part of things. So thanks for making this happen.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, you guys, I'll see some of you tonight, and we will edit this up, and I'll get you a copy, too, if you'd like one, I assume. Right, Mark?
Oh, me? Yeah, please. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, okay. You guys have a great day. Thanks so much.